Welcome, everybody. Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. It's evening for me. I'm tuning in live from Maharashtra, India, the Government Eco Village. Kishore and Achuta are holding it down in Brooklyn and Queens. And our live rewind. Our live Zoom studio audience is representing all over the globe, and wherever you are, you're part of our family. Being here in India, I'm also realizing there's people listening, guys. You may not think so. You may not realize it. The people listening, they're out there. They're listening in Australia. They're listening out there in Europe and London and the UK and in South America. They're listening. I met some of them today and this week. And so there's people out there. We're out there. Thank you. We love you and we're grateful and we're just happy to be here. How are you guys doing?
I'm doing great. It's Tuesday, I think,
Don't
and
ask me. I've been traveling internationally last couple days.
and I'm going to India in a few days, like in 2 days. So I'm kind of like in the build up leading up to it. I won't believe it until I'm seated on the flight, but I'm doing well. How are you, Achyuta?
I'm not going to India, so I'm still sheltered in America.
You can find shelter anywhere. We were catching up before we launched into this episode, and you guys were telling me what you talked about yesterday. I was like, wait, stop. Let me start. And then you just say all that again. And so you guys were telling me what you were talking about yesterday, like a little recap. And so maybe, shit, you were saying so many beautiful things about surrender.
Yesterday we were talking about surrender and what we think surrender is versus what we feel like we get when we surrender. And we were also speaking about how sometimes we are under the misconception that the act of surrendering hastens all of the negative reactions that we don't want, when in fact, that's not exactly true. Those things are happening anyway, but we seem to think that, oh, just because we've surrendered, now everything bad is coming. And so if I don't surrender, then none of the bad things will happen. But that equation doesn't really work out. So we did spend some time on that. And I think we kind of had left off there. And we can even pick up with that even today and talking about surrender and suffering and how the two are not actually, they don't have to be linked. It's not like your surrender will bring your suffering. We hear about the famous prayers of Queen Kunti, and she says, well, these calamities in my life have helped me to see you, Krishna. So if that's the case, then please allow these calamities to come again and again. And a lot of us think like, whoa, that's a very heavy prayer. I couldn't pray that. I'm like, but is not praying it keeping the calamities away? Did we just convince ourselves that just not saying it's not like Beetlejuice, you say it 3 times and then the calamities appear. They were already there. They were already coming. Now it's about changing our perspective and how we navigate those calamities and sufferings that are coming, whether we ask for them or not. It's now about how do you handle the fever now that it's already there, versus, oh my God, but if I say the word fever, it'll appear in my life. Which, if that was the case, there are also a lot of good things that I've said that maybe have not quite materialized just yet. So either our belief in that attraction and manifestation is a little wonky, or maybe it doesn't work exactly like that.
I'm probably more on the wonky side.
I
Kishore,
remember
would you say something?
Yeah, I remember a long time ago I was listening to a lecture from Ramnath Swami, and he said something that really stayed in my heart that I remember, especially when things are bad. And he said that in this material world, rewind. In this material world, pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. And I really love that because the point that he was trying to make is that like difficulties are going to happen. pain is going to happen, you know, disappointments are going to happen, you know, this is the material world. And like Achyuta always says, it's like you have to read the fine print. It's like we're understanding, and we've been exploring these first 3 chapters of the Gita, you know, this is the nature of the material world. You know, we're not going to get happiness and satisfaction out of it. And actually, you know, it is a place of pain. You know, just think about the physical body and everything we go through in this body. But what he was saying is that the suffering that comes after that pain or disappointment, you know, that internal heart suffering that we're feeling because of all these things, that's actually where, you know, I love this word that you brought in, Achyuta, perspective comes into play. Because it's like, wait a minute, can I look at this in a different light? You know, is this taking me somewhere deeper? Is this taking me somewhere else? Am I able to look at it in a different way? Which is really hard to say to someone, you know, when they're going through that suffering. Like if I'm like going through it and sad and depressed and whatever, and someone just came up to me and was like, well, you could just look at it this way and then all your problems would be solved. I'd be like, nah, go away. You know, don't tell me that. But I think it behooves us. I'm bringing back that word. We haven't used it in a while. I think it behooves us for ourselves internally. You know, I write a lot, and I think writing is a really nice place to process, you know. So when we're in our internal processing, can we be kind of like lay out this I don't know if narrative is the right word, but look at the bigger picture. You know, look at the bigger picture of this pain or difficulty or reversal. How is it fitting into it? How is it guiding my story? How is it taking me to hopefully a deeper place of understanding with Krishna? Because I think one of the big points we made yesterday, and which you brought up again, Achyuta, was that the surrender is not necessarily going to look the way that I want it to look. You know, it might look messy. It might look, you know, it might feel very difficult. It might feel very hard. And that's okay. You know, that's okay actually, because in those moments, I remember the way that I spoke about it to my yoga students. I gave that little story yesterday, that I think that sometimes with surrender, I'm doing air quotes, with surrender, or like letting go or giving up control, it can sometimes be scary, because there are moments in that surrender that can be very intense, or like bringing up a lot of stuff from the past. But I was speaking about this topic of surrender to my yoga students, and I mentioned this yesterday, and I was telling them, you know, I like to think of surrender less of like, I'm just totally letting go of the reins of control, and I'm just, you know, Krishna, take the wheel, just go for it. I'm no longer here, you know, in control at all. And rather, I like to look at it as like, I am taking a step in the direction of, I am taking a step into the mystery of this relationship with Krishna, you know, because I don't know what's going to happen. And that requires a lot of faith. And that requires me to be okay with the fact that this is a mysterious space. You know, it's kind of a gray space. Like, I don't know what's going to happen. And that's what makes it a relationship. And I have to allow for that mystery to unfold, for there to be reciprocity. You know, it's not a stale equation of like, I do this, and now Krishna, you give me this. You know, it doesn't really work that way. What do you got to say, Daya? You're quiet.
I'm just listening to you guys recap and elaborate.
What do you feel about surrender, DG?
I feel you guys should do it. One thing I was just curious how surrender came up, like what was going on in your guys' life that made this prescient for you in this moment that you were thinking
It wasn't
about?
about life. We were talking about Bhagavad Gita. It was not about life. No.
But you said you didn't read Bhagavad Gita.
But we were reflecting on the past verses of Bhagavad Gita, wherein which
Got
Krishna
it.
has spoken extensively about the topic of surrender.
Got it. Okay, understood. Point taken.
No, actually, how did we get on
Next question.
this?
Next question.
So we got on this topic of surrender, I think, because I gave a Bhagavatam class yesterday morning, and it was about reciprocation. And it was about reciprocation. And then we talked about this verse 4:11, even though we haven't read the fourth chapter yet, of as people surrender unto me. Oh, I remember how we got into this topic. So then I brought up this verse of
Meaning I didn't know as I was speaking just now, but I was hoping it would get triggered, in which it did.
it did.
I did this
So we brought up this verse, as people surrender unto me, I reciprocate with them accordingly. And then more specifically, we went into the second part of the verse, which says that actually everyone is following my path. Everyone is following my path, whether they know it or not. And we started to talk about how we are looking for Krishna in so many things in our life, and so many of the endeavors in our life. We're looking for that deep relationship with Krishna. But when our forays into that exploration get thwarted, when we are met with disappointment,
when the
then
forays into the exploration get thwarted. I love
That is
that.
a good sentence. I like
That's a
that.
great
That is
sentence.
like a
I
yummy English.
didn't mean to
sentence.
interrupt you because you were on a roll, so forgive me. I felt like that sentence couldn't go unacknowledged.
It's
I
such
just
a
wanted to
good,
just
yummy sentence. Like that's
yeah,
like thesis sentence right there. That's a good one.
yeah. Kishore's going for it. The behoove is
I'm
in
going
there.
for it. I'm going for it. Wait a
Sorry,
minute.
don't let me thwart you.
Okay, I won't let you thwart
When
me.
the
So
forays into that exploration get thwarted,
the forays of my exploration get thwarted, then I become disappointed. We can become really disappointed and yes, I remember, and close our hearts off to the mystery of surrender, and we can become bitter, we can become cynical, we can become nihilistic, and inevitably kind of just calloused towards not only life and other people and relationships, but callous towards our relationship with divinity or with Krishna. And so we started to talk about, like, well, what keeps us from surrendering? Like, why do we become bitter? Why are we, getting defeated after, well, I mean, so many defeats in life. And then that's when we started talking about, like, surrender. I think that's how it went. Right, Achyuta? I think that's what it was.
That is exactly what happened. And we were then speaking about like because I was also bringing up the point that as much as we give surrender kind of a bad rep, we are surrendering all the time. We are exercising that surrender and that faith and that trust all the time. But we feel like as long as we don't give it an actual name like that, then none of the bad things will happen. We are constantly trying to hide ourselves from uh, unpalatable situations. But that's not necessarily this is the material world. We keep thinking that it's not going to work the way that it works, or that we can control it and make it stop working the way that it's working, and that we're just not in control of the material world in that way. So yeah, you're absolutely right. That's kind of where it came from.
got it. Beautiful.
I was just looking up nihilism, which can be pronounced either way.
Casually looking up nihilism.
And it's the rejection of all religious and moral principles in the belief that life is meaningless. And it just reminds me of Srila Prabhupada's Pranam mantra, the one who has crossed oceans and seas to eradicate impersonalism and voidism. And so this nihilistic idea is something that Krishna consciousness is kind of directly opposed to.
Yeah.
So sometimes
Are you
it's
guys?
like we got to think about that. Like the things that we are doing are like cloaked atheism, and we dive on into it thinking that this is somehow renunciation, when Krishna consciousness is something else. It is no longer about trying to shape, mold ourselves, or even the rules of this material world. You're not going to fit into all of the rules of this material world because the rules are rigged. You're not going to change and shape the rules of this material world because they're rigged. And my sister and I and my sister-in-law, we were all talking to kind of like our kids about this topic yesterday. And we were kind of asking them, like, how are you feeling in this material world? Like 12 and 8. And they were also kind of even acknowledging, even as kids, that this material world's not great.
Sucks, Mom.
It really, and for everyone, kind of, it's not, no one is actually really having a good time. And we were kind of just gently putting in the idea that, well, the reason for that is because this place is meant to frustrate you. You're supposed to get frustrated. So all of a sudden, like, well, but I'm so frustrated. Yes, you're supposed to get frustrated. You're supposed to get frustrated enough, Srila Prabhupada says, sufficiently frustrated with material nature that you finally say, okay, look, maybe this is not the answer. But we are stubborn. Like really, 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 really stubborn. And we will convince ourselves that either this frustration is actually tasty. We will convince ourselves that the most like horrible tasting experiences somehow they had some merit in them. Oh, but like but it was okay because, and really sometimes the simple answer is it was okay that I went through that because it brought me closer to Krishna. It was supposed to be frustrating. This place is not great. It's not pretty. It's we are constantly trying to like put curtains and candles, and we are buying like the finest silks for like our prison cell. And the people on the outside of the prison are like, this is absurd. Why are you decorating it? Get out. Like the prison door is actually open. You could walk out. And then you don't have to be in this confined situation. Like if you think about people who are locked up, and the way dignity is stripped from a person, the way so many things are stripped from a person, if they had the opportunity just to leave, you'd tell them just leave. I'm like, well, no, actually, I feel like I have a really important job here. I'm like, well, what is it? And I'm like, well, I have to move these rocks from this side to that side, and everybody here is depending on me. And they're like, that job is actually not. That's not. You're not even a warden. Like you're not. That's not that important. Just go. We're like, but I really, really feel like my purpose here is in being the rock pusher. And if I don't push these rocks, then the faith of everyone connected to me will crumble and fall. And so this is how these spiritually minded saints, teachers, enlightened people who have seen the truth, as Bhagavad Gita likes to speak about them, they're kind of looking at us going, just leave, just leave. It whatever whatever we think is so important will still be important even after we leave this jail cell. Whatever impact we think we are going to have, we will still have had, even if we leave it. But the time that we spend trying to decorate it and turn it into something else, it's frustrating us because we're supposed to leave. Don't stay in the place that is named a prison, which is easier said than done.
I was thinking today, I gave a class here in India, and one thing that came up was, I think one of the worst things you can do in spiritual life is lie to yourself. And I think spirituality is a big process of learning to be honest with yourself. And knowing better doesn't necessarily mean that you do better. And I think that's part of the process of sadhana bhakti, is that we we know better a lot of the time, but we still struggle to do better. Like we know I should leave. We know I need to get out of the prison. I know this is temporary, but yet due to some conditioning, I continue to decorate the prison cell, or I'm just conditioned in some ways, but at least not buy into the story that of the material world in a way that I'm fooling myself, as you were talking about, like the tasty frustrations. I should see my attachments and addictions for what they are. I should understand, at least, even if I'm not able to do it, you know, I should understand the clarity of the process and the direction I want to move in. And then I think surrender is really putting yourself in Krishna's hands, that I can't do this on my own. Like getting to the point of like, Krishna, I need you to actually carry me across the finish line. And he meets us halfway. And so I just appreciate that we were talking about that growing honesty with ourselves, at least. And somebody brought up the 12 steps and about how, you know, we're called to take a fearless and a searching and fearless moral inventory. And then the next step after that is to admit to ourselves and God, another human being, what we found. And so it starts with admitting to ourselves and admitting to God, and being able to at least have that honesty. We may not be able to share openly. You don't have to spill all your dirty laundry all over the place and overshare at dinner time, you know, all the stuff you're going through and the skeletons in the closet, you know. But you can at least know where you're at, and know that all of us are accepted. All of us are, there is no material impediment to spiritual life, in the sense that there's no disqualification. Like surrender doesn't require anything other than just letting go. You know, you don't have to be in a certain place in order to practice it. But I think surrender is letting go of the idea that um, um, I can get through without God's connection in my life. And so I appreciate you guys sharing that and invite me into the conversation and remind me a couple things. We're at time. Achuta's raised her finger. She's got something to say. We nailed it. And I gotta run. So Achuta's gonna say something. Then we're gonna turn it over to Kimberly for our wrap ups. And then we'll have some closing words.
I mean, maybe I'll just enter in this thought to pick up for tomorrow. It's like, what do we do? And because I've been, you know, I was reading some sections of Srimad Bhagavatam with my sister, and then I was just kind of listening, and I was thinking about just the things that feel like they stop me from surrender. And one of those things that sometimes I feel like can stop us is our own trauma. And so just as you were saying, like, oh, we don't have to, you know, overshare at the dinner table. Sometimes when we've gone through things and we feel like we've been unheard about the things that we've gone through and the tough parts that have happened to us in life, we start to get to a place where we start the healing process, and then we hear, okay, you've got to talk about it. And then we kind of get stuck there. And we never graduate from the, okay, I've talked about it, and now what? So what happens when surrender almost feels unfair? And I'm you know, we can pick it up tomorrow, but it's like, what happens when the side effect of my surrender is now it just feels like everybody's like, oh, we'll just get over it now. Like, whatever, it's done, you've experienced. You've now surrendered, which means you should just shut up about it, because nobody wants to hear about it. Like, what happens when surrender feels unfair? Does surrender feel unfair? What does Krishna do about it when surrender feels unfair? Is it just people that are making surrender feel unfair? Like, what do we do about that? And I guess I do have some ideas kicking around, but like I said, we can pick that up tomorrow. Like, is the fact that surrender somehow feels unfair? Like, it feels like the bad guys are going to flourish and get away with everything, and the people that have been set upon don't get anything, and that's what surrender looks like. Does surrender look like Moses frees all of the Jews and then they wander around for 40 years? Like, does it feel like, oh wait, we surrendered and then we got out of this perilous situation, but didn't find a promised solution for another 40 years? Wasn't it 40 years?
Yeah,
It's like a really long time.
a long
And then
time.
Moses doesn't get to go to the promised land.
Nope.
So what happens when surrender looks unbalanced and wonky? Because, we might think, oh, we should surrender. Like, there's no cause for us to think that it gets weird or unbalanced. But then there are some examples spiritually that look unbalanced. What do we do with it? And is that a valid stumbling block on the path of surrender?
Tune in tomorrow for failed attempts at surrender, where we ended up embarrassing ourselves by sharing too much and letting go too soon. Kishore is going to start us off. That'll be tomorrow, same time, same place. No, just joking, sort of. I'll start us off, guys. I'll think of a failed surrender story. Until then, Kimberly, what you got for us? Wrap it up. Some takeaways. What are we walking away with?
Thank you. Today, we're walking away with, from Kishore, I've taken away that pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. From Machuta, we're taking away that the rules of the material world are rigged, and we're supposed to get sufficiently frustrated and then leave the prison. And then from Dayal, we're taking away to grow in honesty with ourselves and place ourselves in Krishna's hand. Thank you.
Good job, guys. Thank you. Got a closing word, Kishore, Achyuta?
I guess I'll just say that because I really like this point that Achyuta brought up and I want to talk about it. We'll talk about it tomorrow. Just that like surrender is not I feel like surrender is simultaneously not what you think it's gonna be in both a good and bad way. Like it's not what you think it's gonna be in that it will also surprise you, but it's not what you think it's gonna be in that it also might be very challenging and it might push you to certain limits. So it's very interesting. I'm excited to talk more about this tomorrow.
I think my closing word is, just like everything else in the material world, there is surrender in different modes. So there is surrender in goodness, there's surrender in passion, there's surrender in ignorance, and then there is surrender in transcendence. And when we key in to the surrender with the transcendence, there are no failed attempts. I feel like the failed attempts come when we are still engaged with all of these different modes and trying to figure out who is deserving of my surrender.
My takeaway is stay close to good friends, because you guys are so beautiful, sharing so many sweet things, making me think more deeply about my life. And what I've really been meditating on was just like, what are the stories in my life? And I'm just trying to think about ways in which making it real for myself. And so A is like, when I get spiritual information, to take the time to look back and see where it becomes real for me on an individual level. And also, yeah, just appreciating the real conversations. So thank you. Thank you guys so much. Thank you everybody for being here. We did it. We're in the limbo space between third and fourth chapters of Gita. We're talking about surrender. So we'll pick it up. Somebody write down where we need to pick up tomorrow, because we always forget. So somebody write that down. Pick it up tomorrow. And we'll see you same time, same place then. Bye-bye, everybody.